Okay, welcome to another of our talk for the virtual book tour. Welcome to the water cooler. My name is Nadine K. Thompson, and today I have with me Diana Powell. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you for having me, Nadine. Thank you.
Yes. So whereabouts are you joining us from?
At the present moment, I am in the UAE and I am an educational consultant here, advisor to the public sector school system.
Okay, so because I thought you're in the UK, so you're in the UAE. How is that for you, and how did you get to the UAE? What was that journey like?
The journey to the UAE or to the Middle East, I will say,
Oh, to the Middle East.
has many layers. You can tell by my accent. I am from the UK, and my background actually is education, but I'm also a business consultant. I've worked for a number of government agencies to support small businesses, charitable organizations to scale up. I'm also a corporate trainer in corporate leadership, motivating those men and women who just needs an extra support system in the corporate space. So it was quite interesting because how I ended up in the Middle East was a bit by default. It was to do with the Brexit, actually. And unfortunately, a lot of my government contracts were actually tied to the European Union. And so when the UK decided to leave Europe, then most of the contracts basically they went on pause. So cut long story short, I need to look for a plan B. So I went back to my default, which is education. And what happened was an opportunity in the UAE. I didn't get it at first. So I actually went to Saudi Arabia for 2 years. I was in Saudi Arabia for 2 years. And I have now been here in the UAE. This is my 5th year now, actually. So it was never the intention to be out here, but it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. I've been fortunate enough to meet so many amazing men and women from all over the world. And it's just, people will say it's two extreme cultures if you look at it from the perspective of the UK. However, you need to live in a country, you probably can relate to what I'm saying here, to see the realities of it. So, yeah, so that's how I ended up here in the UAE.
Okay, I don't know much about the UAE, but I have a niece who's now working in Qatar. So just for Chinese New Year, I visited Qatar. That was my first time going to any country in that region. So I can get a little glimpse of, and she talks about be working and being in that area, what it is like. So
Mhm.
that's quite interesting. So I can relate to what you're saying. People say it's very extreme. I'm from Jamaica now, I'm living in China. People always say,
Mhm.
what is it like? So that's part of your journey. So how did you get to become part of the virtual book tour?
It was actually interesting because a friend of mine, she was on a book tour last year, and because of my background in business development, I participated in some of the round table kind of discussions to support entrepreneurs or authors who are at the very early stages of their journey. And I already had a book in mind, but it wasn't until her name is actually Sonja Clayton, and she's an amazing,
Ah, yes.
amazing
I
writer.
listened to her story. Yes.
So
Yeah.
my she's also somebody that is much more than just a friend. She's is also, I would consider her like my sister. So she was the one that encouraged me to really come on board this year. As a writer, as a new writer, for me, this is a bit nervy for me because now I'm actually on the other side of the table. And because of the nature of the book I'm writing, I'm putting myself out in the space. I'm bringing people into my space to know more about me and my journey. So I thought to myself, well, through her encouragement, and she's also my writing coach, okay, I'm going to travel down this pathway. I'm it's the weirdest thing. It's like going down a pathway and you're not quite sure what you're going to encounter. And every step of the way is a new experience, it's a new encounter. And I'm actually quite enjoying it, actually. And just listening to all the other authors as well and how they started out. And you have some really seasoned authors and some authors just like me, just starting out.
Yes, it's really a mixed bag. Now, as you
Yeah.
said there, that it's really like you're going down this path and you don't actually know where you're going. So I
Mhm.
think all of us, when we start this journey to become a writer, we feel like that. Because I
Mhm.
remember my own journey when I started in 2021, I was writing all along, writing poems, but just for myself. But when I decided to publish, it was like, where do you go? What is happening? Who do you talk to? How do you, is the story what people want to read? And so I had many questions too. But
Mhm.
I followed my heart, you would say, and I followed my passion and I did it, and it brought me a lot of joy and it took me to other destinations. So
Yes.
where
Yes.
has this writing taken you to?
Oh, where has it taken me? What I will probably say is it's taken me somewhere that I never thought I would end up. Right? Okay, I mean, my book is called Afro in the Boardroom. I think let me give you some context, then you can see
Yes.
where I've ended up. Right.
Yes.
So Afro in the Boardroom is, in a nutshell, it's about the navigation of the business world my um, through my viewpoint, through my experiences, through my narrative. So I mentioned before that I was a business consultant, worked for a number of government agencies for a number of years. And a colleague of mine actually said to me, why don't you document or put together some sort of manual, a business manual to support entrepreneurs and also people in the corporate space? It was never really something that was on my agenda because I write, but I am a business writer. I put bids together, business plans, strategies. That is where my craft lies. I never really thought of putting together as an author a book or a manual. So moving forward, we were kind of tossing around with the context of the book. You know, what shape and form would it take? And so anyone who knows me in that space will know that I'm very much about supporting melanated Black men and women, entrepreneurs, those who are starting out, those who are in leadership roles. That's always been the area of my focus. In the UK, there are many challenges for those communities, and they're not always serviced the way they need to be serviced. And sometimes it takes somebody that can relate to them, that looks like them, that also understands their journey. I mean, that in itself is another conversation in itself. So how the name came about, Afro in the Boardroom, I was very much in my authentic self. I used to always have my hair, it used to be in a natural hairstyle, it used to be in an afro. That was just me. And so my colleague said, why don't you, because he just said, well, Afro something. And I was like, I just couldn't connect it as I thought he was messing about. But I really then thought about it because my authentic self is based around my heritage. And I talk about this in my book. Everything I do is rooted in my authentic self. It's rooted in my culture. It's rooted in my heritage, my values. Everything is underpinned by that. And my hair, as a metaphor, represents that. So when I now speak about the boardroom, that was an era that I kind of tossed back and forth with as well, because it wasn't, I didn't really want this manual to just be about the corporate space, because my client base is quite wide. I support sole traders, solo entrepreneurs, mompreneurs. I support those also in the corporate space, but I wanted to see if I could find a way of pulling, I say something, a manual, because I wasn't sure what form it would take it to incorporate all that. And then I came up with the idea that people move around in places and spaces. So, boardroom is another metaphor. And that's how it's connected in terms of the business world. Because what I would like to say that we are all CEOs of our lives, and we move in different places and spaces where decisions are made, where we have challenges, where there's growth, where there's triumphs in our lives. So I use the idea of the boardroom along my journey to speak to my reader about the different places and spaces, or the boardrooms that I have encountered. So I'm narrating my journey, how I came about to be a businesswoman, how I transformed myself along my journey, and then I reflect on those spaces, those places, those moments, and I bring it to the boardroom. So life is life, but Afro in the boardroom is about transferring those experiences and what they would look like in a business environment, in a business space. So that's where it came about. So where I am now is I've written this book, and it's been so amazing actually, because it's very much about me. This book is very, very personal. And this is one of the reasons why I have also a writing coach to kind of guide me along this, because I never really expected it to turn out this way. Remember, I said to you, I thought I was going to write a manual. But as I was writing, I said I needed something a little bit more for those who could resonate along my journey. So for them to resonate with me, I've got to give a little bit of myself.
Yes.
So now it's getting a bit personal now. And so I'm writing about my encounters, about my moments with people, with institutions, and situations. And because when I speak to my clients, I give them scenarios, and a lot of the times the scenarios I give is my own scenario. So I found that I was also relaying that in Afro in the Boardroom. And so it's a navigation of me. It's a navigation of my highs, my lows, my triumphs, my moments of silence, how I navigated microaggressions, how I became a businesswoman and a mother and a wife. I speak about the women in my life throughout my journey and how they've impacted me, because I think it's important for many of us as entrepreneurs to really think about ourselves and how we encounter in the space and how we encounter with the business, because a lot of the times the way we relate to others, the way people relate to us, a lot of it's about relationships.
Yes.
Afro in the Boardroom is about the different types of relationships, how you turn up for yourself, how you turn up for others. But there's three key things I talk about. I talk about transformation, I talk about the authentic self, I talk about intentionality. I talk about those three things are interwoven throughout all the chapters. Because people are stuck in places, situations, and they don't even know how it actually came about. So I had to kind of give you some context first to kind of tell you where I'm at now.
Yeah. Because
Because
as I'm listening, yeah, I'm getting that picture. And I'm also thinking, as you said, you started at one place in the writing, thinking you were only going to be doing a manual, but then you started getting this personal story in because you need more for people to resonate
that's
with. Yeah.
correct.
Mhm.
That's correct.
Mhm.
And so what's manifested now here is workshops. People will wonder, are you doing any workshops? Are you doing any talks? I found myself, creating blogs now around different moments that have come out of the book, and so what was a seed now is actually growing into something I did not foresee that will start to happen.
Yeah, and that's what a book does. It really
Yes.
takes you into different places. So as you said, you've created like blogs. So can you share more about that on workshops that you have done?
I'm still at the early stages.
Mhm.
So, for example, in my book, there is a chapter where I speak about narcissism, and the encounter for me was something. It was quite interesting because it's not. I did not recognize it as that. It's only when I was doing my research afterwards I realized that that's what it was, right? Because I was a young woman in a corporate space, and the encounter I was having with this particular individual, I didn't understand it. All I remembered was, and how I verbalized in my book was, this person just didn't like me. No matter what I did, no matter what I said, nothing was good enough.
Mm.
And it was very subtle. And I'm very much about the innate. I'm very much about my gut feeling. And you could be there looking at me, smiling with me, but my inner being is picking up something else, because it's not so much what you're saying, it's also how you're behaving around me. And I just didn't understand it. And the reason why I'm talking about this is I've had many clients that have been in spaces and they've had encounters with a senior person or another colleague, and they just feel like less than themselves and they just don't understand why.
I've been there, yeah. Even in the space as a teacher, and working in this space. Because as you talk about the spaces where we are, I've experienced the very same thing because they have this whole thing of, oh, you need to have collaboration, collaboration. And I remember feeling like I was the worst, didn't know anything, couldn't teach, couldn't do anything. Yeah. And as you
Yes.
said, in the moment, I couldn't understand what was happening as well.
You just don't know.
Mhm.
And so for me, writing Afro in the Boardroom actually unlocked certain memories
Hmm.
that I didn't really think that affected me. But when I was going through the process, because it's quite interesting, because I will come up. It's funny because I don't come up with the title. I will just
Mhm.
come up with the memory. It's the
Hmm.
memory first. And as I'm typing, as I'm thinking through the process, certain memories and situations are coming up. And as a younger person, I'm reflecting of how I navigated it. And it's only through doing further research around other businessmen, women, those in the corporate space. And then I realized, but hold on, well, actually, this is something, these behaviors have certain characteristics
Yeah.
You're not in the space to call it out.
Mm.
Because a lot of the times you're also on your own. And so, you've got this battle of dealing with people and their personalities, understanding yourself in that space. Also, because there are times you say to yourself, why didn't I say something?
Yeah.
Why didn't I do something?
Mm.
At the beginning of my chapter, I speak about the authentic self and how that came about. My parents are Jamaican. I'm born in the UK.
Yeah.
My parents, my grandparents, they're from Jamaica. My grandparents came to the UK post-war Britain as part of the Windrush era. They came to the UK. They had 12 children. They had four in the UK, and the rest they brought over. My dad had another story. He came over late 50s, and the reason why I talk about this is that growing up as a young person in the 70s, 80s, I did not see myself as a British person. That's the landscape where we were growing up then. You know, you related to the place or the countries
Right.
where your parents and your grandparents came from.
Mm.
That is important to understand, because then you understand why I held certain values when I navigated these places, and why I speak about authenticity. Because they came over with a certain mindset. They came over because they were pioneers. I call them pioneers because they came into a place post-war Britain where it's just after the war my grandparents came, and they didn't know much about Black people. The
Mm.
furthest they knew is probably America. They didn't know about anything else. And so when they encountered, they call them the Windrush generation, they racism was rife.
Mm.
And so our parents, my grandparents had to navigate their spaces. They never came with nothing. They were actually businessmen and women. My grandfather was a property developer, and so was my father. And they came with aspirations. They wanted the things, the best for their children and their grandchildren, but they kept coming up against these systemic obstacles that was rooted in the system in that point, in that moment. The
Mm.
reason why I talk about that, because they told us how to navigate the spaces that we navigate now and how to recognize some of them. And so when I speak about my authentic self, it's rooted in family. When I speak about my authentic self, it's rooted in community. Because if I never had that grounded, when I walked into a lot of these spaces, I don't know how I would have coped.
Mm. Mm.
There's a lot of men and women are not anchored in that way. But don't get me wrong, sometimes there were challenges I had, because one of the things about the elders, they sometimes like to keep things to themselves. And
Mm.
one time I actually spoke to my father, and the way he spoke sometimes was if he's never encountered racism. But then,
Yeah, I
oh,
think though, I think that generation though, I think for them it was to go through, to struggle through,
yes.
and not because they didn't see, because for a lot of people, okay, you left home, you're thinking I don't have anything to go back to, and I came here to make it. So
Mhm,
whatever the context is, I am going to try and go through this. So I remember when I was in high school, I read this book called The Lonely Londoners,
mhm,
written by a Caribbean author. And he was talking about, and he made it in a kind of funny way,
mhm,
telling these stories about these, whether they were Jamaicans or Trinidadians or whichever Caribbean people that came. And, they'd be living in these apartments, they had no heating, they had no this. But when they went home for anything, they would dress the best. They would be, put on this British twang, as they call it, way of speaking, because they didn't want people to know that side. So they never really told people back home what it really was, because it was almost like, this is a space I came here and I'm here to make it then. So I struggle
Mhm.
through. So that is what I got from, we got from older people who had been to England and all of that and came back to Jamaica. You never saw them really wanting to tell that side, that harsh side of the reality.
And what you're saying is very, very true.
Mm.
It didn't it manifested also for some amongst their children. And so if you just told us, mum, dad, grandma, granddad, the realities of what you experience, then a lot of the challenges that we may have had, we may have dealt with them differently.
Could be a coping mechanism too, because I
Yes.
remember, yeah, because my grandfather, he actually he went over to England, but my mother was left behind in Jamaica, and then he went to England and had another family. So while he was there, I think he never returned to Jamaica until probably 20 years later, so many, many years later. And I remember him never really talking about this. And when I read Lonely Londoners, I started asking him questions. And he said to us, he actually worked in one of these places where you went underground when it 5 a.m. in the morning. So you went underground when it was dark, and you also came up with when it was dark. So like for 20 years, he never saw sunlight because he got up so early, went into underground to work and never came up. And so he never saw really sunlight, and it became just a coping mechanism. They internalized it and never thought about really what it did to them. It was almost like a survival, way of living.
But listen to what you just said.
Mm.
It became a coping mechanism for
Coping
surviving.
survival. Yes, it was survival.
That's
Yeah.
that what you've just said, you're talking about maybe in the 60s, 50s, early 70s. That is still happening now,
Mm.
right? That is still, there are people that, and I'm speaking from a point of view that I myself can relate to this. I'm 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 trying to create Afro in the boardroom where I'm writing about my experiences and I'm not talking at you, I'm with you.
Mm.
Because that, what you just said is actually happening to people in places and spaces now. You know, we speak about code switching. We talk about turning up in spaces and having to make adjustments um, to make others feel comfortable, um, to make yourself less threatening,
Mm.
to make yourself small.
Yeah. Mm.
Um, and that in itself can be for some considered a traumatic experience, not being able to be yourself.
Mm.
So, you mentioned about the coping mechanisms, how you turn up, how you dress, and how you speak, how the baritone natural tones that we have to take it up a notch,
Mm.
right? So not to sound so threatening. Even, the way, because Jamaican people have a way of expressing themselves,
Yes, yes, yes.
right? And if you don't understand that, you would always feel that there's a confrontation taking place.
Mm.
No, that's how they express
Yes, I would say.
themselves.
Mm.
So, you know, Afro in the boardroom, that's why I keep talking about places and spaces and a point of reflection. At the end of each chapter, I kind of summarize some of the key points that I've encountered, but I give the reader a point of reference and reflection for themselves. How did you feel, or did you encounter? It's not, Afro in the boardroom is not for everyone. And I make that declaration.
Yeah, I was going to just say that to you. So who was the audience you were thinking of when you wrote the book, you know?
Because I was, it's funny, you know, because I was thinking of, that's why I mentioned about transformation and authenticity.
Mm.
Authenticity for me is being that innate self, it's being you, and everything that comes with you, being comfortable in your skin. There's a point in there I talk about hair actually, and there's a whole discussion about natural hair in working environments. There's a big thing, especially in America, about can you as a black woman wear your hair natural. And I'm not talking about choice. That's not where I'm coming from. If you choose to have your hair however you want it, that's your choice. I'm talking about the culture environment where they are dictating to you how you should how you should have your hair.
Mm. I remember years ago, I lived in Cambridge for 2 years. I was studying there. And I remember there was one of their museums, they had a whole thing about Afro hair. So my Nigerian friend and I, we went to this exhibition. And the question she was like, so what's this big thing about hair? And she said to me, like, in Nigeria, if you turned up with your natural hair for something, people would say, oh, don't you have any money? Why do you turn up looking like this?
Yeah,
Is it that you're
yeah,
broke? Yeah,
yeah,
is it that you're broke and you don't have any money?
yeah.
So yeah, so back then I was wearing my hair natural and stuff, and she would sometimes joke and say to me, "Is it, it's because we are broke now why we don't have our hair, and I said to her, "No, I mean, I actually like, wearing my hair like this." But I said to her, the space has been created where people see it as not it's unkempt, it's not neat. Even in schools in Jamaica, I remember for sometimes, if you can't wear hair in Afro to school. You would have to, you know, put it in cornrows or put it because it would be seen as you have unkempt hair. Even for Rastafarians, they had to fight for their kids to wear their hair as Rastafarians to school. So even in spaces like those, you find that there is this kind of contention where people can't just be themselves because there is a stigma attached to natural hair. Mhm.
And even if you just think on what we've been, just let us just think about what we're saying here,
Mhm.
right? We're saying that your authentic self, this is what God has given you. This is nothing that you've decided to go to the salon and you want to change up your hair. This is what you have been born with. And now you have people that look like us that are saying now, why do you want to look like that? The question is, why are you saying that? And so, and that's why I've said, there's a whole conversation about self and identity, and being able to be yourself. So going back to what we're saying, so the reader I'm talking to are the readers that now are questioning themselves in these places and spaces. They've had enough of rhetoric, and now want to be themselves,
Yeah.
and everything else.
Mhm.
Because I know it's easier said than done. But I'm an author, but I also have my own businesses. I have a number of businesses that I have. And the reason why I talk about this, because we all have choice.
Yeah.
You could either stay in those places and have to you leave your house every morning to put up with that.
And as you said that, that is this, that when I saw the title of your book and I looked at it, that is the space I am in. And I said, yeah, I really want to read your book and see what is your take on it and what, because even living in this space here in China, I have gone through so many things. And I reached a point where I said, no, I'm done being small. I'm done being, this person trying to fit in, because that's not who I am. And I have taken on, you've taken on this thing, and it's almost like you're hurting yourself and you don't
That's
realize, and you're more like you're hurting yourself more and more and more. So I've reached a stage where I'm like, no, this I am being who I am, and I'm not apologizing for that.
that's
I'm not
right.
apologizing for that
That's
anymore.
right. Because
Mhm.
one of the chapter is unapologetically Black,
Yeah.
unapologetically successful.
Mhm.
We 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 live in a world now that is, and COVID has proven this now. Yeah. We are what they say in the new norm now. Yeah.
Mhm.
And in the new norm, there are new opportunities for many people. I'm very much about the creative, um, um, those about creativity. I'm very much about creating opportunities. I'm very much about what is it are you gifted with? Can you
Mhm.
turn that into a profitable, sustainable business idea? And being able to explore that. I talk in the book about side hustles as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use that phrase as, you're making that transition out of working for somebody else, and now you're exploring the idea of doing for self now.
Mhm.
Because I think, and as I said, I'm talking to a particular type of reader who is at that stage, or who is now questioning themselves in those spaces and say to themselves, there must be more to life than
Mhm.
this.
Mhm. Or they've always known, but they are ready now to take the step. So they've
Yes.
always known that this is so, but they have allowed themselves to be in this space and to accept. And now they're like, it's time to take that step, take the step now. Mhm.
And there was another thing in there, and you kind of touched on it when you mentioned about the lonely Londoner. Even though I'm assuming the person who wrote that book was talking about Reconstruction era, 50s, 60s, and probably early 70s. Yeah. Nothing much has changed.
Mm.
They make you believe. They
But
have.
and yeah, so another Caribbean writer begins his book by saying things, they look like they've changed, but they are all still they remain the same. Yeah.
Because it's rooted in a systemic environment, and
Mm.
it's interwoven into the culture of these spaces and places.
Mm.
There are people, for example, that don't want to say that they're they're unhappy.
Mm.
They don't want to share the idea of, I'm not myself. I don't know where I'm at. I don't know how to navigate this. I don't have all the answers. I don't know what to do. Afro in the Boardroom creates a space for you to have that dialogue with yourself. So there are tools that is being created for your own reflection. And it's also about, and I talk about mentorship. I talk about the idea of sisterhood. When I speak about sisterhood, I'm talking about those women, and I'm not excluding men in this because there's other chapters that speak about men, but I wanted to have a chapter specifically on this, where you're in certain spaces, and like the book said, it can be a very lonely place. So you need to have a network or a space where you
Support.
can be yourself and have that support. Because it takes a lot having to deal with people and their personalities and everything else that comes with that. For some, for many, it's trauma.
Yeah.
Um, so with sisterhood, you have spaces or a person that you can just be your authentic self without being non-judgmental, not
Mm.
non-judgmental, without anyone judging you. And you can just say what you, because sometimes you just need a soundboard. You don't even need somebody to even say anything. You just need to get it off your chest.
Be able to talk, be able to express, be able
Just
to.
to talk, to
Mm.
express. I talk about this and how it's helped me um, to articulate myself and to also understand that I am not on my own in this. A lot of the things that we go through, we think that it's just us. No. And I was talking to one of my sisters about this, and she was talking about her boardroom experience.
Mm.
And she was like, well, sometimes it's nice to know that somebody else is going through something worse than you. Right?
Yes.
But not in a
Yes.
bad way.
That's
It's
the
just
bad way.
I'm not on my own. It's just I have to speak. I just thought it was me, right?
Mm.
I'm just thinking that I'm the disrespect, the rhetorics of not being able to be yourself and having to shrink and to be silent and not to turn up for yourself and more.
Mm. Because one of the things I found is the whole thing of the mental health and well-being. And just yesterday, one teacher said we were like giving awards and they said, this is a final award for the year and we're giving awards to all these students. And she said, and I want to give an award to all the teachers who survived, who made it to the end. Because nobody talks about us and our well-being. What about the well-being of the teachers? And I said, that is one thing that is lacking a lot because, you're just expected to give, you're expected to do, you're expected to show up. And somebody else said, and if you fail, somebody's there to say you failed, and there's nothing about your well-being. And so I really want, to say how, especially for us as women, Black women, there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of things that people are internalizing and there's just stuff that sometimes you don't know how to interpret it. So a friend called me and she said, I resigned my job because I had a situation where I talked to the student, he kept disrespecting me, I reported it, nothing was done. And so I literally was asking him to leave my classroom. And the student said, you bullied me. So she was in the wrong. So you have these situations where, as you said, navigating these spaces, it's really difficult at times.
We cannot control things around us, but we can control how we respond to them.
Hmm.
Um, and those responses, those responses are rooted in a lot of the times in how we were brought up. Some of those responses are also our own traumatic experiences that we've never dealt with, and they pop up in different points in our lives. So sometimes when you're dealing with somebody, your body is actually responding not to that situation, but responded to another situation that happened before and you never dealt with it. And sometimes we are silent on the matter, and your brain is like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. So not doing anything then means you're silent. And you go home, you sit down, and it's on your head. I should have done something. I should have said something. Why didn't I say something?
Mm.
You start beating up on yourself. But there, I'm not, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not. This is not my. I'm not a professional in this space, so I'm not gonna diagnose that. I can only speak to you about my experiences and how I recognized it and how I came out of it. To some degree, there are still times I'm still going through, because again, the different spaces, different situations pop up that you've never encountered before. Right? And this
Yes.
is why your network is also important for you, to be able to understand what is happening, and a safe space for you to be able to say, look, this is what happened to me. I'm like, I don't even know why I never said anything. I don't know.
Yeah. And then as you said that there have been so many situations where I didn't say anything and people thought, oh, you're stupid, you just took it, you just this. And as you said, my body was probably responding to I have come to understand that there are even generational things that you are carrying with you from way back when, and that even in your response is because of stuff that happened generations ago. So you even have to free yourself from all of these generational things and just be able to move lighter, to be able to show up for yourself.
And we I don't think we have enough conversations around that, because I think we as women, as a people, we don't like to talk about um, things that are bothering us.
Yeah.
There's this whole thing about mental health, and this also came up during the COVID era. Yeah. Um, Mental health, mental well-being. Because we talk a lot about our physical health and physical well-being, but we don't talk about our mental health and mental well-being, because again, there's this whole stigma, and it's rooted in our community as well. There's something wrong with you. You want to say something, but you don't want to say it because you may think there's something wrong with me, right? But there is something wrong with you. But it's the stigma and the behind your back talking and the whole rhetoric of
And
what's over the
and
head.
getting help,
Yes,
where to go to get help,
you
because
go
that
to
was
get.
a big thing in COVID. Where do you go to, and even now, and as you talk about that, especially for people being outside of their culture, living in spaces where they're having to, reconcile with so much, where can they go to get help? Who can they talk to? So I think creating more of these spaces. So I'm happy that your book is out there highlighting these topics. Do you have a copy of the book you'd like to show to us?
My book actually is on pre-order. It's going to be launched in autumn, so that's why I'm having many conversations,
Yeah.
podcasts, webinars, roundtable discussions to really kind of shed some light. Because even
Mhm.
though I've written the book is not finished.
Yeah, I'm sure you will have other, and there are things that people will see in it. Yes, yes.
That's
Because
right.
I'm the same too. Because my book that is I have coming out is called Staring at a Blank Page. And it's all about the writer in that space where you are almost in a crippled state where you're not able to get anything out and finding a solution. How do you move forward, start writing again? So I don't give people like what to do. I just give them writing prompts and just ideas. You just write. and it kind of
That's right.
create that space of
That's right.
writing. But it's so interesting talking to you because it's like there's so many um, parallels in your story. Because I've lived in three different countries. I've lived in Japan, where I was working there as an ESL teacher. Then I went to England and I studied for 2 years. Then I came to
Mhm.
China and then my home country, Jamaica. And in every space, I experienced so many things. So I'm also writing a book about all of that. And one
Brilliant.
of the things was actually England surprised me a lot because growing up, we heard about England, we had family there, everything. So I thought that because when I lived in Japan, it was a totally different culture. So I thought
Mhm.
coming to England would have been easier to live in England, but I found England so hard because it was like they had this thing of thinking that Jamaica was still at 1962. And I mean, you got this even from Jamaicans. And people will be saying stuff to you, and you're like, do you realize that Jamaica has moved forward and nobody is still in those? And people have electricity in most places, people have, mobile phones, people have this, people have moved along. And some people had never returned home, so they still had this thing of seeing it as just a backward third world country.
Mhm.
And I remember my friend and I, who she was from Nigeria, I'm from Jamaica, and at university, they would say to us, "Oh, we can't understand your accent." And I remember, because it was almost like looking down on us, like we could not be good enough to to share and to present and everything. I remember going one job, a lady said we needed to call a taxi to leave, and she said to me, "Oh no, 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 they can't understand you, so you can't call the taxi." And I'm like, "What do you mean? I take a taxi all the time. I order a taxi all the
And when
time.
did this
What do you
happen?
mean?"
What year did this
So we
happen?
were
What?
working at a job and it was quite late. And we said, okay, we need to leave now. We're going to order a taxi. This was in Cambridge. And the lady who we were working with, she said, no, 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 let me do it. Let me call the taxi because I'm sure when you order the taxi, the taxi driver or the taxi cab company won't be able to understand what you're saying.
And the point I was saying is whether it's 1950, 1940, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, it's still
Yeah.
happening
hmm
now.
hmm Yeah,
It's
and but for us, it was almost like because the place I felt it most was with other Jamaicans who had now lived in England who thought themselves better because I had come straight from Jamaica. So it was almost like I was below them because I had not had this British experience, and that
that
that shocked me more than anything because it's bad enough when other people are discriminating against, but your own people making you feel bad was just like. It was terrible. It just felt very.
I didn't touch so much on that,
Mhm.
but I will be touching on that, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I think that for many is the shocking part of it.
Mhm.
And it's interesting you're saying that because I had a similar encounter in the Middle East as somebody that remember I said to you, as far as we were concerned, and I had this conversation with many, as far as we're concerned in the UK, we weren't British, we were Jamaican. But then the flip side to it is, but you're not Jamaican.
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
that's
so
a
that's
that's
right
the
too.
that's the other side. That's another conversation in itself when you leave that space and you go into the diaspora now, and
Yeah.
then
Mhm.
you're told, no, you're not actually.
Yeah.
And we all in the diaspora, and I call ourselves the diaspora because we're out of this the we're not all located and in the same space, but we have different experiences, different encounters. And the thing that could unite us is the very thing that separates us.
Yeah. Mhm.
And what is interesting about that, it's not unique just to the island.
Mhm.
But the flip side to that is also I have friends and associates from other regions of the world. even if they are not born in the country of their grandparents or parents, doesn't matter where they are, they have networks and communities, and they still acknowledge that that is home.
Mm.
That's a conversation we don't really talk about.
Mm.
We don't really talk about. We speak about systemic racism and microaggressions of the dominant culture that we reside in, but we don't talk so much about some of the challenges we have amongst ourselves.
Yeah, our own people have created these challenges. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I said going back to Afro in the Boardroom, Afro in the Boardroom is on pre-order. It's going to be launched in the UK Black History Month. And so people can access the pre-order on my website, www.dspowell.com, and all the other freebies and all sorts of events that are also happening in and around the book as well. I already see that there's going to be a chapter 2 coming out.
Mm-hmm.
There is a book that's in the making as well. I'm getting that ready for March 2026. The 19 Traits of a Superwoman.
Wow.
You know, it's looking a bit more deeply on our characteristics, and also it's as much as we have a lot of challenges in our life, there's also a lot to celebrate.
Yes.
And I
Joy.
didn't.
Yeah.
There's a lot of.
My
I didn't
focus, yeah,
think.
my focus is here is about joy.
Yes.
Joy. Yes.
There's
Mm-hmm.
this second book is more about the celebration of what you have, that innate, and that we need to celebrate that. You need to acknowledge that.
Mm.
So that is the focus there. But Afro in the Boardroom is more about navigation. It's more about turning up for yourself.
Mm.
It's about understanding the different spaces and places, the boardrooms that we're in. It's also I've also documented the experiences also for the younger women and men coming up behind us, because as we said before, there are times the elders didn't give us enough to anchor ourselves when we turn up into some of these spaces. They showed us love. They gave us all of that and more. But in my book, I say that I wish we knew more about your journey and
Yeah.
not just, as you said, turn up with the suit and everything and make everyone believe it's okay. And then when you go over there, you're like, hey, this is not what you spoke about, right?
This
You
is
know?
not the land of milk and honey that,
No,
we are
it's
taught
not.
to believe.
But now many are talking about it now.
Yes, yes. And it's
They're
the same everywhere. It's the same everywhere. Coming to China, when I first came here, I think a lot of people were excited to come here to teach. And when people were asking me, I said, I will be honest with you. I'm not going to paint a bed of roses. It has pros, it has cons. And what do you want? What are you looking for? And I've had, people come and say, this is not what they want. They came, they left. I've had people come here and had many struggles. So you have to figure out, where you're at, what where you want to go, how things fit into, how you live. And as you said, if it's not working and you're struggling and you're in pain, it's not worth staying. It's
it's
always
not worth saying.
it's not worth
It's,
staying. Yeah.
the world is a massive world. There's
Mhm.
other places that will
Mhm.
welcome.
Yes. So yeah, don't stay, be unhappy, be in pain, be in yeah. So if this is it, I said I learned one thing when I was working in Japan, they would say every situation is different.
Mhm.
And There are many push factors and pull factors. And one lady taught me, she said, write down all your push factors, your pull factors, put them together and see, and then you make your decision. But you can't base it on what somebody else is doing. You have to know for yourself and find your joy. And I think that's been lacking, I think, in the journey of for many people. And so this year I said I want to focus on joy. And as I made my vision board, the word joy was coming out in many different places. Every piece of paper I found, something was about joy. And I said, yes, joy. Because yes, you work hard, you do this, but you're not showing up in your authentic self. You're not having that joy. And I said, I want the joy of storytelling. So that's my next project, talking about real joy. So has
And
this talk,
you deserve it.
yeah.
Did I say you deserve it? We all deserve it and more.
Yes. So as we bring this to a close, I just want you to tell me some of the joyful parts that you had in working in the boardroom, in serving in this capacity, in being an entrepreneur.
One of the things I talk about is that I know what happiness is like. I had one of the most wonderful childhood that I express it in the opening chapters. Our family was, there's 12 aunts, no, 6 aunts, 6 uncles. We had a lot of cousins, but we were like brothers and sisters. We were jumping in and out of each other's houses. We would turn up for meals. Our family wasn't just blood. Our family was community. I know what it's like to be in a rooted community. I know what it's like to have joy, to have love, to be loved, for people to pour into you. I know what that is about.
And that's the amazing thing about having such a family. That's amazing.
It is. So then when you go into these spaces, I try to recreate those spaces with that joy and the love. And this goes back to um, the networks that I've been involved with, created. And I'm not talking about formal, just people that in the boardroom spaces, I speak a lot about people, because sometimes we have relationships that are only fleeting moments. But in those fleeting moments, those individuals have made such an impact in your life. You've never forgotten them.
Mm.
And so, even though we speak about some of the challenges, there are some beautiful people, there's some beautiful souls in those spaces that will turn up for you. And there's not this, they don't need anything in return, because that's just them. That's their nature. I speak about I told you the women in my lives. I speak about my colleagues, the elders that sat me down, dust me off, told me the realities of the world. And just to, that encouragement. There's many people in my spaces that have given me so much encouragement, and they turn up in other places and spaces, and they champion me. I don't have to be in all the places and spaces. There are other people that turn up and talk on my behalf. It's about the relationships we have with people, for that to happen. I talk about my daughter, I talk about my husband, and as a woman, these spaces is about being able to have that that the what's the word I'm looking for? That unification with your partner, with your husband, is to be able to create those home spaces for you and your family, so your children also understand how to navigate these boardroom and places and spaces. So it's interwoven throughout the book about some of the beautiful things that can happen. Because again, it's also about balance as well. I wanted to show that there is also another side, and how that can be nurtured within yourself, how that could be nurtured within your family environment, in your home, and in places and spaces as well. Um, I think, yeah. I don't want to give too much either because I'm going to tell you too much about the book.
So, as you talk about your daughter, do you think that this book is a kind of legacy for her, sharing these stories?
Listen, the opening of the
Mm.
book, I acknowledge my mother, for me, who was my first role model, an entrepreneur, even though she never recognized herself as an entrepreneur, she
Yeah.
was an entrepreneur.
Mm.
She died before the first draft of this book, actually, and I didn't have the opportunity
Mm.
to um, to read to her. She would have loved this.
Mm.
So when I speak about my daughter and legacy, is also dedicated to her as well, as a roadmap.
Mm.
Each chapter, her grandmother is also interwoven into this.
Mm.
So it's very much generational. She stands on my shoulders. I stand on my shoulders of my mother, and my mother stand on the shoulders of her mother. All of us are interwoven in these chapters. But for her, I say to her, and I say to her all the time, the world is your oyster.
Yes.
Understand the boardroom places and spaces, understand people, live in your authentic self. We have taught you from a child, your grandparents have taught you, your great grandparents have taught you, you live that authentic you. You be larger than life. Don't shrink to
Yes.
make
Yes.
people feel comfortable around you. No, shine your light.
Mm. Yeah. And
And
they're in a different world, but they
yeah,
still have their challenges. So it's
they're
good that
very, very different. And even with that, I got her to read certain drafts for me and just to kind of get her take on it. And it's
mm,
quite interesting because
mm,
there's going to be a conversation where it's going to be kind of intergenerational
mm,
about certain chapters.
yeah.
That's something that's I'm planning,
Yeah.
that's something
But
that's on the agenda to come up.
I think it's necessary because, as you said, if we can tell these stories, tell the story, because tell stories from your grandmother to your mother to your children, and how they can understand themselves better, how they can navigate spaces, because the world is their oyster. And they are going into, I mean, a lot of things that, a lot of spaces that you never went in, I never went in, and the grandparents didn't imagine they could go into. So they're going to need all the strength they can get to go there. And the world hasn't changed. There are still
Of
these
course.
innuendos and still these traps and still these, a lot of stuff is still happening. So it's good, I think, that she has this.
And like what you just said, I think you said something about storytelling. Storytelling in our culture is for us, they're roadmaps. They
Mm,
within each story, there is a moral to that. I remembered my father, he's from Trelawney, and my grandparents, they live in the cockpit country. And I never forget when they one of the things my father made sure, right?
mm,
All of us had to go home. We spent time out there. We spent time with especially with our grandparents. And
mm,
I remembered, just sitting on the veranda, and it was always in the evening, and they used to
mm,
always tell stories. And that
mm,
used to be the best time of the day. They used to always sit down and they always had something to say. There's always a story. And
mm,
we still tell those stories, but we tell those stories in a different way.
in a different way.
But there's still stories that help us, our children, our grandchildren to navigate this world.
Yeah. And to recognize the two parts of themselves, as you said, being Jamaican, being British, being, and being who they are. So it's bringing these things together and understanding that, of course, it's always going to be a part of you. And these
Mhm.
two worlds, how they can reconcile and how they can, be
That's right.
happy and be themselves. Yeah. Mhm. Well, I think it's a great book. I think it's necessary. I think especially for women who I know navigating these spaces, and there's so many women who are choosing to become entrepreneurs these days, that it will be a great book for them to read. So I just want you once again to just tell us where we can find your book, and if we need to get in touch with you, where we can get in touch with you.
Okay, to find my book and to get in contact with me, you can go to my website, www.dspowell.com. On the website, it's got all my social media handles. Um, I'm encouraging people who's going to come onto my space to subscribe, because when you subscribe, you will be able to know the dates of the workshops, the webinars, and all the other events that will be taking place. And also, there's also the access to the pre-order of the book Afro in the boardroom. And I'm going to put in later on the pre-order for the 19 traits of a superwoman as well. So there's going to be a lot happening. So if you want to know more about Afro in the boardroom and more about myself, Diana Powell, go to www.dspowell.com.
Thank you so much, Diana. It was great talking to you. I learned a lot. I thought about my own journey as I was listening to you, and I also was encouraged. So thank you so much for showing up today with us at the water cooler. And wherever you are, we'll be sharing this later so people can get this great and wonderful message. Just before we go, as we talk about showing up at the water cooler, what is your drink of choice when you are in the boardroom? What do you have?
My drink of choice is
Yeah.
an almond hot chocolate.
Okay. Yeah, I know for many people it's coffee.
I
I
love
also
that hot chocolate.
either, yeah, I'm not, I have coffee, but I'm not so much a coffee drinker. I have a cup of tea, or now that it's in the summer, I'm having a nice cool drink or with just water with some, whether it's cucumber or a slice of lemon or something that's refreshing and cool. So thank you so much. And enjoy the rest of your day in the UAE. And we'll be in touch as we talk more. So
Thank you
thank
very
you so much. Thank you. All right. I'm going to stop recording here.